With Lisa. I'm very excited to have you here today. Today, we have the New York medium, Marina, and I'm very excited to have her, so please welcome Marina.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Thank you for coming.
Pleasure.
So you have a very interesting story on how you became a medium. Can you share that with us? Because I think it's a fascinating story.
Sure. So I am what I call myself an accidental medium. I was not born with it. I had nothing to do with anything medium, psychic, anything like that. So it kind of came to me late in life. I woke up like that. Literally woke up one morning and the dead were talking to me. So my original reaction was to check myself into a mental institution. And then I got over it because all of a sudden I was hearing things that had nothing to do with me. They were meant for other people, they were messages for other people, not the information that I would be privy to, especially when I didn't meet these people before. So it took me a long time. It took me a long time to understand what's happening, to wrap my arms around, well, what's going on, why now, why me? And then I did the most obvious thing for me coming from academia is I started reading everything I could get my hands on because I wanted to get a 360-degree view of this whole thing.
Right.
I read everything from philosophy to Eastern religions, Western religions, mysticism, life between lives, past life regressions, near-death experiences. So it was a whole mix of scientific studies and memoirs. And the only thing I could relate to is when I would read Medium's memoir, and it always started ever since I was a little boy or a little girl, I remember, and I couldn't relate to that. However, it helped me to see that these people are experiencing the same sensation. So I then found a mentor. I found, and I developed as a medium because I needed to be able to hone my skill, but also develop it to the point where, guess what, I can ask questions. I don't have to listen all the time to what is being told to me. I can ask, it's a two-way conversation between me and spirits. And so about 2 or 3 years, I was developing as a medium. And then at some point, I found myself doing 2 full-time jobs. I had a successful business. And at the same time, I was seeing clients for free because it was a friend of a friend, a friend of a friend.
Right.
Somebody wanted to come
Which is
and
normally
see
how
me.
it happens.
And then I had to make a choice because I could no longer do 2 full-time jobs, and I took a leap of faith. I had to sell my business, and here I am. That's many years later.
Nice. So what was the most scariest thing at first for you, realizing, oh my God, I can hear dead people?
I was never scared. It's interesting because I get that question a lot. Scary was never in my mind. I never felt scared. I never felt worried for my sanity. Yes, scared, no. But rather annoying. When I first started hearing the other side, what was very annoying is I had to relay the message. I would get a physical anxiety when I would hear somebody in my, chirping in my ear. Well, you gotta tell my grandson, da 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 da. And I would get such physical anxiety that I had to go over to somebody sitting in a restaurant or in a subway car and tell them what I'm picking up, which is mortifying to me because I don't think that anybody should be ambushing people who are not looking for a reading. And it took me a while to learn how to manage that. It took me a while to have a relationship with the spirit world where I could say, you know what, private time, not now, cannot do that. And so, but that was very annoying in the beginning because I would get physically unwell until I walked over to somebody and delivered a message. We're over that now.
Okay, good. But how did people, when you would go up to someone and say, look, I know you don't know me, I'm a medium, I have this message, did they look at you like you were crazy or did they open it?
Yes, of course they did. Just like I probably would if somebody who was sitting in the next table in a restaurant is all of a sudden coming over to me and telling me Grandma Sylvia said you need to paint your house, and quit. Some people thought I was totally nuts, and I don't blame them. Some people were not so polite. They told me exactly where to go, which was disheartening because, deep inside I knew I was in the wrong. I shouldn't be doing that, but I did know how to stop it. So it took a while, but today we're not in that place anymore, thank God.
Oh, that's good. So besides being a medium, and you also are a psychic, so besides hearing spirit, you also do tarot cards. So do you have a preference when you're giving a reading? Do you prefer to be more the medium, listening to spirit, or do you prefer the tarot cards?
Neither, because it's not a matter of preference. The way it distinguishes is that, listen, if I'm channeling somebody, it's going to be somebody who is related to you somehow. Grandma, uncle, friend, friend of family, whatever it may be. I cannot tell you what they will or will not answer. Just like I cannot channel anybody on demand. I don't control who comes through. I just sit there and wait for somebody to come through. I always tell my clients, you bring your peeps with you. I can't just sit here and say, you know what, let me talk to Lisa's Uncle Tom. Not gonna happen, because it's not up to me.
Right.
Usually it's people's intent to connect that brings certain spirits to them. And that's what happens. So when we do a mediumistic reading, I cannot tell what they're gonna talk about, which is, by the way, I always advise my clients, unless they really, really must, not to bring friends with them. Because
Right.
sometimes the conversation gets so private and
Right.
so delicate. Because if Grandma Sylvia wants to blab that your dad cheated on your mom for the last 10 years, I'm just gonna, I'm not gonna filter information.
Right.
I don't have the ability to filter. I will just repeat what I'm hearing. And so during the mediumistic reading, it's really a reunion with the other side. And I don't know what they're gonna say, what subjects they're gonna touch upon. Sometimes they will answer your question. Interestingly, usually they answer before you ask.
Really?
Very often it happens at the end of the session. I say, well, okay, what questions do you have for whoever's here? And they'll say a question, I'll say, wait a minute, but we already answered that, because that's what was said in the beginning.
Okay.
And so a lot of times the questions get answered before you voice them, so to speak. So it's really just a chat with the other side. There's no magic, there's no ritual, there's no burning candles, none of that. We just sit and it's a three-way communication, so to speak. As far as the tarot is concerned, tarot is very useful when you need to resolve a particular issue. Because the way I like to read the tarot is so detailed. I usually ask a lot of questions. I always tell people it's not because I'm exceptionally nosy. But I hate it when I hear people say, well, next month you're going to be happy. Awesome. What am I supposed to do with that information? And so it's a very detailed reading. We get into the nitty-gritty of the problem. The tarot is also awesome at raising issues that people sometimes didn't think they wanted to talk about or need to be discussed. And the cards are very persistent. So many times I have people just refuse to talk about something, and the cards keep coming up over and over. And at some point, my client would say, okay, fine, let's talk about it. Once you get over that hurdle, the advice just follows. Tarot gives you advice. First thing I tell my clients, it's not fortune telling. There's no such thing as fortune telling. We have a free will. And so what the tarot does is, outside of dissecting information, bringing issues to the table, it will give you advice at the end. What you do with that advice will be entirely up to you. Ergo, no fortune telling. So those are two different kinds of readings that I do. They're very different. Sometimes I do a combination of both if somebody wants both. But it's not a matter of one over the other. It's more of, well, what is your purpose? Are you looking to resolve an issue, or are you looking to just say hello to whoever is here from the other side?
Do you ever get people that come to you and say, well, I just had a reading with so-and-so and this is what they said, and now you're saying this to me, so now what do I do? So I get a lot of questions and a lot of emails from people that they want to know something specific, or one medium tells them one thing and one medium tells them another. What do you tell people on that? How do you advise them, okay, well, this is where free will comes in, or maybe it's a different spirit, maybe that is going to happen, or if someone's looking for something in particular, but they're going to different mediums to try and get the answer that they want, and one is telling them that and then one isn't, how do you feel about that? What do you tell them? How do you guide them through that?
So I think we need to take a step back for a second, because I think we use the word psychic and medium interchangeably, and it's not.
Okay.
So the best way I can describe the difference is, if you remember the old transistor radio, we need to turn the knob to tune into a particular vibration. So psychics have the ability to tune into other people's energies, other people's vibrations. Mediums pick up their communications from a different channel, so to speak. We pick it up from the other side. So it's not a matter of one medium tells me one thing and the other one says something else, because different spirits come through and they want to speak about different subjects. Usually it's what's important to you at the moment that spirit will discuss at any particular reading. And so I never did have people come in and say, well, I went to another medium and I had Grandma Sylvia as opposed to, Grandpa Bob. And so, because spirits could be different, although I did have some people who come and say, every time I go to a medium, I get Grandma Sylvia. Well, that's because she watches over you. That's why, because she's the spirit who's with you at the moment, whatever it is she's helping you with. As far as the tarot is concerned, if you don't want to hear my answer, don't come to me. It's very simple. Because I don't sugarcoat things, I don't make things up, and sometimes it pains me to tell people what I have to tell them. But if you want to hear a sugar-coated fairy tale, then you can go to, I don't know, a gypsy shop in Hell's Kitchen. Otherwise, it's kind of like, don't ask the question you don't want to hear the answer to. It's that simple.
What do you think having this gift benefits you?
I grew a lot as a person. I think spiritually, I also have gone so deep into the philosophies of both East and West in my study of the tarot, that today I look at the world differently. I also there's a reason I do what I do. Believe me, giving up on a successful business was not something I had in mind. But then when you think about it, most everybody can learn to become a computer programmer. A lot of people can study and become a banker. Not many people can become mediums just because they want to.
Right.
So if this was something that was given to me late in life, I felt it really was my duty to help people. To help them in many ways. Sometimes just being able to say hello to mom is a nice thing, But also, coming from the world where I was never quite sure what I believed, it is very comforting for me to be able to teach people what happens when we cross over. It's not that bad, Things are not horrible. It's not all fire and burn. So I really feel that on some level, I have a duty to educate people about the spirit world, around life after death, what happens when we die, reincarnation, things of that sort. And also look at the world differently. I view the world very differently now. Having studied the tarot for many years, the way it should be studied, you dive into astrology and you dive into the Kabbalah. And then inevitably you get into quantum physics, right? I know it's quite a stretch, but nonetheless, it's there. And so you start to look at the world differently. You start to view people differently. Not everybody's out to get you. People are just trying to live their lives and get by. And sometimes you get sideswiped in the process, but it's not necessarily malicious intent. Some people are just thoughtless. And so I think my own view of the world has changed greatly. The way I look at people, the way I treat people has changed tremendously. And I don't want to sound like a Girl Scout, but I do have a genuine desire to help people. To if nothing else, to understand that this is not all there is.
Right, no.
This stupidity is not it. That there's a universe out there that we don't necessarily know about.
For me, I would like to know more about what it's like in our universe and in heaven and stuff when we pass over. I know that the deaths that I've dealt with through family the last couple of years have been really hard, and it would be nice to know what it's like. What can you tell us that heaven is like, or the universe is like? Like, what happens when you die and you transfer over? They say it's magical, they say it's wonderful, you're with everybody that you used to know, but it kind of scares me,
Well, I have
Where
to
do
be
you
honest
go?
with you, I don't know that I want to be with everybody I used to know. I don't know, you may call it heaven, I don't know about that. There's some people from my old neighborhood in Brooklyn that I never want to bump into again. But the reality is, I personally don't, I believe, well, let me just take a step back. My beliefs come from two sources. Years of research that I did, and when I said to you I was developing as a medium, and I needed to understand this whole thing, I needed to get a 360-degree view, and by that I meant I didn't just want to follow what mediums are saying, or what psychics are saying. I wanted to understand it from different world philosophies as well as science. And so a lot of my knowledge comes from there. And then at some point I realized whatever I was missing, I could just ask, which is exactly
Which
what
which is exciting. I mean, I wish I could just sit in bed and ask, hey, what's the lottery?
And that's
numbers?
exactly what I did. So, having said that, my personal belief is that heaven and hell was something that people have, I don't want to say invented, the way they try to explain a process that happens upon crossing over. And that process is life review. So a lot of times when you read books on or studies on near-death experiences, you hear people say, well, I saw my life flash in front of my eyes. It's kind of like that when we cross over.
Really? Okay.
Now, it, it's a difficult concept to understand, but there's no time or place on the other side. So if you get into quantum physics, time and place is something that people invented. We're not the brightest creatures, so we invent things. Time and place is one of them. And so as pure energy, as pure spirit, we don't have that liability that we carry with us. And so what happens instead is we know everything at once. So it's not like we review our life play by play, but rather we see everything. Now, what happens though, once you are outside of the human body, because you're one part of this huge universe, you are part of the universe, so to speak. Not only do you see what you have done to people, you feel the pain because
Really?
you
Okay.
are part of that other person. You are connected to everybody else in the universe because we're just little parts of this whole big energy. And so you feel the pain you've caused others, and imagine feeling it the way they felt it all at once. It must be horrible. It must be absolutely terrible to feel all that you caused. On the flip side, you also get the benefit of all the happiness you brought to people because you feel that as well. So to me, this invention of heaven and hell is something that people try to um, describe this crossing over. So I don't believe in heaven the way the Bible teaches us. I don't believe in hell the way the Bible teaches us. I do believe it is a personal heaven and a personal hell, so to speak, and we're responsible for it. And so the point is, and I believe me, I never want to preach to anybody, but the whole point of it is you live your life so that you have the least amount of regret of bringing pain to others, because that's what's important. How, when my kids were very little, I mean, before they even understood what I was saying, I would teach them one thing over and over again: do unto others as you want done unto you. And this was way before I became a medium. And yet, I now understand why that's important, even more so than just from a purely exoteric level. Because in reality, you will feel that pain at some point, and it can't possibly be any good. In terms of being with everybody we've ever met, because we got to address that, a lot of times somebody does pick you up as you cross over. I always, not always, but 90% of my readings, Spirit will tell me who met them when they crossed over.
Really? Okay.
And it's usually somebody close to them. Sometimes they get very surprised. Sometimes it's the person who they didn't necessarily get along with. So in the afterlife, we have groups of souls that we develop with. And let me just preface by saying, to me, the spirit world is reality. What we have here, not so much.
I've heard that I've been told that before.
Because we perceive certain things the way our brain wants to perceive certain things, but the brain is limited. And so once we cross over, we are back in what's called soul groups, or I call them soul groups, meaning a group of souls that we develop with. We go from life to life with. Interestingly, what I found, sometimes our soulmates may not in this life be our best friends. They could be somebody you have a contentious relationship, but it is in adversity that we actually learn a lesson. And so I know the expression soulmate has been abused, Romeo and Juliet.
Well, there's so many between soulmates, kindred spirits, twin flames. I mean, there's so many.
I use soulmates really in a technical sense, just to describe a group of souls that we are close with, that we travel from life to life, and then we help each other. Sometimes the soul may stay back and guide you through this particular lifetime.
Now, when you say we have a group of souls together, so you're saying when we die, we have a set group of people, and then when we come to Earth, we're not necessarily with those people? Okay.
Or not. It's random. We choose our lives.
Right, I believe that.
We choose our lives, we choose who our friends are, we choose who our parents are, and we design.
Then why do we choose the guys? I can't speak for everybody, but I wish some of the guys,
Well, maybe that's your lesson to learn.
Maybe
that's a lesson to be learned. And I don't know what it is, I'm not gonna pretend to just
right,
throw
but I
assumptions
just,
at you.
you laugh because you look at certain, why would I choose that? Like you go through something, why I chose
Well,
that?
why do people choose to be born handicapped? Or, with limited brain abilities? From what I know, sometimes we do choose an easy life if we had a really difficult one or X amount of difficult lives in succession. We choose to have a really easy, breezy life. We're not going to learn much of a lesson, but it's more like a vacation. I look at it like going to college. The more difficult the course, the more you're going to learn from that. And by college, I mean
Yes.
here on this planet. And so, yes, we choose it because, again, as advanced souls, we understand that we need to go through certain lessons. We need to develop as souls. And so, yes, we do have groups of souls with which we develop. And yes, there are soulmates. And sometimes in this particular life, soulmate may not be somebody you like very much. But again, that's part of a lesson.
So do we then, and a lot of people ask me this, so if your mom, like my mom, was my mom my sister in a past life? Like, are you like in the same kind of family? Like,
no, it's not a family dynamic. Your best soulmate could be somebody you met in five minutes in this life, but made an impact on you.
Because I've heard like the family that you're in and the people that you're always around, like I was always together in a life with my mom and my sister. And
totally
so that's
opposite
not,
of what I know.
okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I from what I know, it's I don't want to say random because it's not, but a relationship on this planet doesn't necessarily correspond to a relationship as a soul group.
Okay.
Because you could be, your best friend could be your soulmate. Your next door neighbor could be your soulmate. Whatever it is, but the relationships are always different. And it's not always the same family. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. You have to understand, we live thousands of lives. And so through thousands, let's count the combinations.
Well, and
that we can have.
and then when you hear reports like, scientists are saying that, we may not be here in 12 years, at least our world's not going to be with the climate change, when you wonder, like, so is that it? Like, is the climate's going to, like, kill everything and then everyone's just going to die? Like, stuff like that is kind of scary.
Well, we also have to think that we're very narcissistic creatures, and we assume this planet is all there is. And if you start to consider universe and infinity, who's to say that
So you do believe in life on other planets?
I don't know. I'm not excluding it. What I'm saying is I don't know. However, I think it's kind of arrogant of us to think we're the only intelligent creatures in the universe. Because also if you start contemplating not only quantum physics, but Kabbalah, astrology, and you think about the word infinity, human brain is so limited that even though we understand, our brain understands the word, but if you try to close your eyes and visualize infinity, you can't. We can't do that. It's just physically impossible. And so many things are physically impossible for us. For example, let's talk about angels. The word angels, the concept of angels. These huge creatures with wings, they look like us, they're lovely with flowing hair. In reality word angel is something that didn't exist until the first examples of the original Bible would come around. There were some cultures before that from whom we stole some of the texts of the original Bible who talked about these creatures that are heavenly, divine, talk about Greek gods or goddesses. And so the reality is what we did with our little brains is we took a concept that is without shape, but we had to give it a shape because we have to give form. Our mind needs to give something a form. So we formed things like gods and angels in our own image. So the only thing is they're powerful and they have wings, or they live on Mount Olympus, or it's a bearded man in the sky. But we inevitably have to give something a form in order to think of it. especially if it's something that has intelligence. It has to have a form, whether it's animal form or human form. And so you get, ancient gods, and so you have angels. And so it is with something like infinity. It's not something we could visualize the universe, but we can't really visualize infinity. We're very limited.
So do you believe in angels, or like Archangel Michael and Uriel, and I mean, do you believe in all of that or no?
Not really, no.
Really? Okay. And why
What
is
I
that?
believe is there are advanced souls out there in the spirit world, much more advanced than we are. And so when I'm reading about Archangel Michael or Raphael or Gabriel, all of those angels, it's so lovely. But then you start to think, well, where do they come from? Well, they come from the Old Testament. Who wrote the Old Testament? Don't start throwing stones at me, but it was people. People wrote the Old Testament. And so what you have is a lot of those names, by the way, I picked up from an older manuscript, the Kabbalah, where they use these terms to describe certain aspects of the very abstract that's associated with the 10 Sefirot, with the Tree of Life, which is not a place, so to speak, or a point in time, it's a state. Again, another concept that a human brain doesn't necessarily comprehend because it's something that our brains are not capable of formalizing. So to me, what we call angels is just an advanced spirit, but we need to give it a form. I do believe we have some advanced souls that are so advanced that they will insist on coming back to Earth, something the Buddhists call bodhisattvas, because they are advanced, they are enlightened, and yet they will come back just to help others, not because they have to.
Interesting. We have some questions. So do you want to just read it? Or you can read it and.
So Joanna asks, can a soul choose not to come back to Earth?
Yes, the answer is absolutely yes. However, we do all want to develop to an extent that we want to unite with the light and never have to come back to Earth. And so for that, we need to develop to a certain degree. Some souls will choose to just rest a while longer. Again, a while is something we need to explain in terms of time. But it's not a matter of choosing. Once we cross over, we understand that we need to do what we need to do. And as a result, we will come back because we understand it's a lesson that can only be learned in reincarnation.
And then what's our other questions? Okay. I know they were like writing down, so I wanted to make sure I got it.
Oh, sure.
Now, we had talked about the difference between spirit and ghost. Now, to me, I kind of think they're the same thing. I think in the sense that spirit is spirit from the other side, and a ghost is also a spirit, but someone that you don't really know, and that's kind of scary in the sense because you don't know who they are. But you were mentioning on the phone that you didn't believe that there was a ghost, but you believed in the spirit because you talked to spirit. So, am I saying that correctly?
Yes, sort of, kind of, yes.
Okay.
So let me break this down. So what I know is spirit, or so we're all spirits, we're all souls. A body is just, look at it this way. It's Sunday, I must wear this outfit, so here it is. It's 2018, so I must be in this body. But what we are is just pure energy. Energy vibrates on different vibrations, which is why I said to you, psychics will tune into the vibration of other people, mediums can tune into the vibration from the other side. So basically, it's nothing but energy in its pure form. That's what spirit is to me. And then we have ghosts. That's a whole other story. So what I believe is that no spirit stays on Earth, so to speak. Once we die, we die. Yes, sometimes it takes us longer to realize we're dead because it could be such sudden death that it takes a while for a spirit to understand that he or she just crossed over. However, what I believe happens is, and a lot of it you hear in conjunction with some older places or houses, whatever it may be, there's such thing that I call residual energy. And let me explain. So something happens, because everything is energy and everything
Right.
vibrates. When something traumatic or dramatic happens in a particular place, that energy is so dense and so thick that ordinary people are able to sense it. Now, what happens when we sense something, Because the brain cannot explain it, the brain does the most natural thing to do for the brain. It says, okay, that's scary, that's dangerous because I don't get it, I don't know what's going on. If I don't know what's going on, watch out. And so we start to fear something where all we're feeling is like residual energy that's inherent to a place or a specific situation. For example, when I travel in places where history goes back thousands of years, sometimes all it takes for me is to just hold on to an old wall. And all of a sudden, I'll start seeing certain scenes, vignettes from what happened
Really?
there. Because
Okay.
there's residual energy. But usually, it's not a nice thing that I'm seeing. Because again, something that transpired was dramatic or traumatic. And it was usually horrible that you start to, I need to walk away. So to me, I don't believe there's ghosts, but especially when it comes to, hauntings and things like that, I do believe that once we sense spirit, as ordinary people, we're not used to sensing spirit, and when we do, our initial reaction is to just say, okay, I'm afraid because I don't understand it.
Right.
But I don't think ghosts are something you could, wrap your arms around or something that's gonna follow you. It's just you sensing energy.
Okay. Do we have any other questions? No? Do you have a question?
Here's a question for you. Can an individual leave residual energy of themselves on an object or at a place?
Absolutely, absolutely. A lot of time when I do mediumistic readings, I ask to hold on to something because that energy does remain. And so I always ask my clients to bring something that either belonged to a loved one or belong to themselves because I don't want to be feeling your neighbor's energy. I just want to make sure I'm picking up your energy. And so you are always leaving something of you. Your energy always can be transmuted through a subject. Usually metal's awesome, but I've had clients bring me a pillow. I'll hold on to anything because energy is everywhere.
Infinite or finite amount of energy for each individual?
That's a great question. I do believe, and again, I am not 100% certain, so I'm not going to lie to you. In my mind, and again, we're going to start with that, my mind, and my mind is not the brightest, but in my mind, it has to be finite, but it's ours, because we're part of the bigger energy. What I also believe is that when we come back into the body, and this is going to be the part that's kind of difficult to explain, part of ourself stays in the spirit world. Our subconscious is always connected to the spirit world. And so sometimes I may be speaking to somebody's grandmother who is reincarnated since, but I'm able to speak to her higher self because we do have the subconscious that is always in touch with what Carl Jung called the collective unconscious. And actually, that's another fascinating point. For me, when I started to study the tarot, inevitably, I very much got into Carl Jung and his philosophies and teachings. And you start to understand that there's so much more to everything out there.
Right.
And especially when it comes to the tarot, it's something that always bothered me because a lot of the tarot readers miss the point with the cards because they read the cards as cards. And yes, they're just pieces of paper, nothing else to the cards. However, the cards have been around for about 500 years, 600 years. And no, they're not from ancient Egypt or Gypsy. There's a lot of that out there. But in reality, they were playing cards. That's all. However, the divination that has developed with the cards was very closely aligned, and it was not reading the cards for the sake of cards, because every card had an association with astrology and the Kabbalah. And it's only when you start to understand the cards in that context, then it's not just, is he going to leave me or is he going to stay? It's rather, okay, here's what's going on around that situation. And here's what the energy is like around the situation. And that's what you need to understand. Now, not is he going to leave or is he going to stay? And I find that these days we shortchange ourselves because we skip the astrological aspect. We skip the Kabbalah because it's easy. It's a lot easier. And yet we're missing 2/3 of what goes into the tarot divination when we do that. I think it's absolutely crucial to be able to understand both. Does it take years to say yes? But Rome was not built in a day.
Now we have to wrap up on time. We have another question. Okay.
We have one more question, final question. Is there a way to remove the residual energy that's left behind, to cleanse it?
No, there's no such thing as cleansing it. There's no rituals, there's no thing, because
So
the
then
whole point is,
not
it's
to interrupt,
not
but
doing
wait.
anything bad.
So like, what about when people sage and, you're cleansing to cleanse the energy, so you don't feel that doesn't.
If you're asking my personal opinion, rituals don't mean much to me.
Okay, that's fair.
I do know that there are certain properties to crystals and to certain incense and herbs that we don't fully understand yet. Absolutely, I agree with that. I also believe that certain smells and certain scents, psychosomatically, will have an effect on us. I mean, look at the Oracle in Delphi. The woman was high most of the time, and she would spew things, as prophecy. Because again, the smells and the vapors and all that. As far as I'm concerned, rituals don't mean much without the intent. It's the intent that counts. And so for me, I don't really think, just to answer the question easily, I don't think there's a way to get rid of residual energy because, frankly, it's not doing anything and you don't need to be privy to it all the time. And I think usually if you think you're seeing ghosts, just say hello, and ask who is here and maybe you will hear the answer.
I don't know if I would be willing to do that, but before we go, do you have any events coming up? Do you want to let people know where they can reach you?
Absolutely. So I have a lot of projects in the works, actually. I've been a busy buddy lately. Currently you can schedule a reading with me at thenewyorkmedium.com, and on the website you could easily see all kinds of readings that I have available. You can see my calendar and book it directly there. I also just published my second intermediate tarot course, and that lives now on citytarot.com. I have now moved all my classes to its own separate site. So part 1, which is I Learn Tarot in a Day, is now available, and part 2 is Tarot Deep Dive, where we talk about astrology. And the tarot are currently both available at citytarot.com. And I am in the process of working on the third and final part, which is the Kabbalistic Tarot. So stay tuned for that. God help us all. And I'm also working on designing my own deck because there's not enough tarot decks out there.
There's not.
But again, because I talked at length about astrology and Kabbalah, I do believe that it's helpful when the decks have that symbology incorporated in them. So it's citytarot.com.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for coming and
Thank
being
you for
a part of
having
my
me.
show.
Thank you.
Had a great time, and thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next time on Medium Rare with Lisa. Have a great night. We still on?